Hi everyone, now I know you're expecting from the thumbnail it to be me and my mum talking about the second 4 previous winners of the Women's Prize. That is such a tongue twister, honestly. I've stumbled over that on many occasions. However, before we get to that quality content, particularly the quality content of my mother, I wanted to just mention something that the Women's Prize have announced today, as this goes live, in the fact that they are doing #ReadingWomen, which is to get people to read, like me and my mum are, and possibly inspired by the absolute joy and delight that me and my mum have been having while we've been doing this. But they want everyone to get reading the first 24 winners of the prize, and then to pick a winner of all winners so far. They did something quite similar on the 10th anniversary, where I think it was Small Island that won out of the first 10, and then Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Half of Yellow Sun won in the second one. But this is like all of them again, up to possibly be the winner of all winners. So you can find out more in the link I'll put down below. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention that. I'll now hand over to me and my dearest mother. I'll speak to you all soon. Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon of Savageries, and today I am back with the second in the series of videos where I talk about the Women's Prize winners that me and my mum have read together. That was a really long intro, sorry. My mother's here.
Hello.
So I will link the video where we talk about the last 4 down below, and I'll also leave links to all these books if you want to give them a read. We won't spoil them, but we will give you kind of a summary and then our thoughts on them, and yeah, let's see if we end up on a harmonious note or not.
Indeed.
So the first one that we've got here is, oh, and I should say, if you're new to this channel, me and my mum read the long list together last year and like chose our own shortlist and all of those things. So we'll be doing that again this year. Right, enough of the Women's Prize loving. Well, no, the whole video is, but you know what I mean. First up, 2000's winner, which is When I Lived in Modern Times by Linda Grant. And this is set in the 40s?
1947? Just 6?
Yeah, April 1946.
Just after the war.
And Evelyn is 20 and she leaves Britain to go and start a new life in Tel Aviv. How can I put this? Because this is one I don't want to spoil. She ends up in a relationship that, well, she kind of creates a new personality for herself, doesn't she, when she goes away?
New identity.
She meets somebody and gets involved in things she probably shouldn't. Is that fair enough to say?
Yes.
I think
I think that's right. Yeah.
This is the proper old original edition, and I see it's, you can tell because it was only $6.99 in those days. Ooh, it'd be $9.99 on the shelves now. Gosh, how many years ago? That's 20 years ago for this one. What did you think of it?
No, I found it really interesting. I wouldn't say I massively enjoyed it. It wasn't, one of the best books I've ever read. I think the thing I really liked about it, and the reason I'm glad I've read it, is because I hadn't really thought about the idea of somebody Jewish returning and establishing a new life.
Yeah.
I think that especially just post-war.
Yes.
So that whole sort of dimension of the kibbutz life and
but also returning to a life that they don't really know, but is part of their cultural heritage.
Yeah, and learning to navigate that as well.
But also wanting to create a new life in what is essentially an older, past historical life.
Yes.
I think that's really well done. I love Linda Grant's writing, and I enjoyed this one very much, but it's interesting. I think I love her more recent books more.
Right.
And I said afterwards that I really love this book, but like compared to other books, it's still really good. But because I love them so much, it felt like when I was reviewing it, I was a bit like, oh, I'm not such a fan of it, but I am.
I think it felt a bit like a history lesson rather than
that's interesting.
A novel almost. I think that's probably, and it's a very interesting point in history in a very interesting place.
It's one I hadn't thought about,
and
like
I
you were
think
saying.
that's why I enjoyed it.
Yeah. But I think what I love about...
I can't comment because I think I've read one other of her books, but I can't remember what it was now.
I love how she writes characters, and I think what's interesting in this one actually, and was probably what stood aside from the other books of hers I read, where the characters are much more... Evelyn is tricky purposefully. She's quite a tricky narrator.
She is.
And in other books, the narrators might be flawed, but they're not so necessarily tricky.
Right.
And so Evelyn you can't quite trust, which I enjoyed, and I like that with narrators. But I think because it felt so stylistically different to what else I'd read, and I need to go back and read Linda Grant's early books because I do. She's one of my favourite writers. But one thing I love, and she says in every book, is that place is a character. So Tel Aviv is vivid.
Is. Yeah, it really is.
And that feels like, you just feel like, and having been there as well, I think that's another reason I really enjoyed this, because I've been to Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
And Tel Aviv is an amazing city because it's built in time order, almost. So you walk through history. It's quite fascinating, because you go from like the original area right through, then you walk literally through the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s to the present. It's incredible. I meant from Jaffa, because Jaffa's the original settlement. But yeah, so I really, really enjoyed it. It's not one of my favourites of hers, but that still means for me it's a good book. That's what I mean.
I think the other aspect of it that I found surprising and interesting was the amount of freedom she had in the 1940s, at that period of time. You know, that she's quite I don't know, quite liberated.
Yeah.
You know, very liberated, and I was pleased about that.
Yeah.
I hadn't sort of.
Because actually, if you compare it to
felt
what her
more
life
like
would have
the
been like,
60s.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. If you compare it to what her life would be like in Britain, it would have been much more restricted. Whereas there, she was much freer.
Yes.
So lots of interesting points in this book, and I would recommend giving it a read.
Yes, I would too.
Then we have, this is the most recent one that I've read, Kate Grenville's The Idea of Perfection. This one in 2001. I love Great Grenville's. I love Kate Grenville's writing. I love Australian fiction, obviously. And I'd held off this one because lots of people have told me this is their favourite book by her, including Evie Wilde, who's written an introduction to this one. So this is set in a small town in Australia. What's it called? I love it because it's brilliant. Karakaruk in New South Wales. And we have Douglas Cheeseman, who is a engineer. We also have, I want to get the name right, Harley Savage, we like the Savage, who is a museum curator who's gone basically to go to the bridge where there's this bridge called the Bent Bridge, which some people want to get rid of and some people want to keep because it's historical, and also because it still works. It just looks a bit odd. It isn't perfect. Perfect comes up quite a lot. So these two characters who are described so vividly from The Off as being a bit different. I mean, Douglas likes to just nosy in people's windows of an evening and see what's going on with the world. And Harley just seems constantly obsessed to be against the world. And I think it's because of what she's been through. She's been recently widowed. Her third husband's killed himself. And she's a bit lost. But then also there's another character that comes in called Felicity Porcelain. Brilliant name. Who is... she is like the picture of perfection. She limits her smiles because she doesn't want wrinkles. Her husband's only allowed 2 a day if he's lucky. And what I love about this whole book is that it looks at what is perfection, why is actually imperfections more perfect than perfection, and why do we put so much pressure on things to be perfect when actually we should celebrate what they are. And I just love the fact that the whole cast of characters is completely kooky. The whole place it just feels like a very Australian novel, which sounds really, really silly, but this is one of the reasons I love Australian writing so much, is because it's just got this quirk. Now, you read this quite a long time ago, didn't you?
Yeah, a very long time ago, and I adored it. I absolutely loved it. I think for me as well, it's a novel about middle age.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that, and that's true.
That whole, again, it's well, is it unusual? I don't know, because Larry's Party, you get a middle-aged phase.
I don't think it's that common.
But it's that whole, because that is the essence of it, isn't it? It's the fact that these two people are at that point in their lives that's very, very important, because they've had all these other experiences. And the future is that bit shorter when you're middle-aged.
Which also has two effects, because it can mean that you want to do everything all at once, and it also means that you're very picky about what you do instead.
Yes, and you know, in theory, you know yourself a bit better than you did.
Yeah.
You know, when you're.
But yet you're
20s.
Still getting slightly more conservative. Slightly more conservative as you go along. Yeah. So even though you know your imperfections, you still judge other people for theirs, and that's what's brilliant, because from the off, the characters are always sort of slightly second guessing each other. And I say characters, but they felt so real. Like this whole book, I can't believe it's not been a film or a TV series, because they're the sort of characters you just want to spend so much time with.
And that you can relate to.
Absolutely loved this. Yeah. And I've been having a real reading funk this year, and this got me right out of it. So
I'm really pleased.
Yeah.
I'm so pleased you liked
one
it.
other book this year has got me out of a funk that I was bitten. Mum's seen that I cracked a spine on a book recently that I was curious about.
No, I've never seen him do that before.
Really loved this. Have you read any more Kate Grenville? Have you read The Secret River? That's the
No.
most famous.
No.
That's about the settlements and the awful
Pretty
things
sure I
that
have, but
happened.
again, I can't. I'd have to look on my bookshelves. I can't.
She's brilliant, and also I'd really recommend. She wrote a book about her mum, who was one of the first female pharmacists in Australia, and it's fascinating. So highly, highly, highly recommend that one. Loved it. Then we have Bel Canto by Anne Patchett, which, no pressure, was one of my grand's and your mum's very favourite books.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting.
Yes, I do.
Because I liked it, I think, but I didn't love it.
So I didn't like it very much.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
I struggled to read it.
And what we should say it's about is
Yeah.
it's set. When is it set? Oh, it doesn't have an actual date on it. But basically, some kidnappers storm a building because they think the president's going to be there and they want to hold him hostage. And it's set in the south of America. And actually, he's stayed. This bit did make me laugh. He stayed at home because there's a really gripping finale to the season of the soap opera.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, that
so
is brilliant.
It's brilliant. And so the vice president is there, but also we have this famous opera singer who's there and a man who's come from Japan. He doesn't actually want to do a deal with any of these people. He doesn't even really want to be there, but he's obsessed with this opera singer. And we follow what happens when they become hostages. Now, what I did like is that I think Anne Patchett does a really good job of. She does the thing where she introduces characters and in a paragraph gives you their life up to that point. That's very definitely done. And she gives you quite a few of the insights into their characters. I just felt it was... I never felt I was in it. I always felt quite distanced from it. I didn't feel like I cared if any of them got shot.
Which is really interesting because what I struggled with was the plausibility of it.
Oh, that didn't bother me so much.
So I found it
it
really implausible, and I found the relationships.
Oh, I didn't like what she does with two of the characters.
I didn't find that credible at all, and I don't know why I didn't. But she's
furious.
No, I'm not furious. She somehow didn't make me understand enough why that would happen.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I kind of feel it's the author's responsibility.
See, I didn't mind that. I felt like we were thrown in to this world that was created just for that night, for this, and you got that background. But I think, for me, I also felt like there was a bit of a case of, oh, I've got all these characters. I don't actually know what to do with them all. So I'll get rid of half of them this way.
But bizarrely, I mean, again, I read it a long time ago. It will be probably, not long after it was published. A lot of it has stayed in my head. I can really visualise the interior of the building.
Yeah.
I can visualise externally what goes on as well, because that's quite important, isn't it? Around the sort of periphery of the building.
Yeah.
With it being a sort of siege situation. So all of that is still very much in my head. But I know it was the sort of book that I almost thought, I'm not going to read. I nearly didn't finish it.
Yeah. But it's interesting because I've not read much Anne Patchett. And she's had a new one out recently, which will be eligible for the prize this year.
Oh, right.
That I've heard similar things about, where it's quite an interesting premise, but from what I've heard overall, you don't connect with the characters. And that was my problem here. I didn't connect with the characters. Now, these characters are very different from me, but that shouldn't matter in fiction as far as I'm concerned. So if a writer's a good writer, I will connect with someone completely polar opposite to me. And there was something in this book that was missing for me, and a bit... Like I said, I just felt a bit detached from it. And there were moments when I was enjoying it quite a lot, or she would do certain... She's got quite a wry sense of humour, I felt. But just overall, I left it feeling a bit,
Yeah.
So not, but just,
It's one of those books, I'm glad I've read it, but I wouldn't be jumping up and down and saying, you must read this.
It's interesting, I don't feel like I have to read her other books.
No.
It has nothing. I've got a couple. I've got one about the magician's assistant, which is about the man who is I think he's a closeted gay man who gets HIV, and then how does he tell his wife? And I think that's going to be quite a harrowing book. But but I don't know. I just felt a bit about it. One book that, and this is no spoiler because if you've been watching the channel for a long time, you'll know that I just was not disappointed by it at all, because I just thought it was incredible, and I had read this author before. Is Property by Valerie Martin. Now, this book, I think there's been a lot of books on slavery. I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing, but I've read a lot of them, and I think it's really rare you come across a book that tells it in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
And with this book, with Manon, who is the wife of the owner of a slave plantation, who has been given as her wedding present one of the slaves, Sarah, who really hates her, can't really be bothered, and may or may not have had a child by the plantation owner himself. it's so clever because with the relation, and there's also, it's based on a true story, which I don't want to tell any of you because you need to read this book to then read the appendix where it says how this true story came to form, because it's just incredible how about this particular slave. But what I think is genius about this book is firstly the fact that the snark I just wasn't expecting, so threw me, but I also really enjoy because I quite like snark. The second was the fact that I love it when authors use comedy and humour to make something awful all the more awful by very slightly like twisting it.
That's incredibly difficult.
So you suddenly go, oh my God, I'm laughing, but actually that's horrific that I'm laughing.
You feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. But also she does it from both perspectives. So it's never jokes at the expense of the awful mistress, just as it's never jokes at the expense of the slave. It's very much... this would make a brilliant two-woman play. Well, you might need the men in because of what happens at the beginning. But the other thing that I thought was brilliant about it was that I've seen a lot of people say they don't like the ending. I'm not going to say what happens. I thought it was genius because,
No, well, again, I read it a very long... Well,
you've always raved about this book for me.
I did. I absolutely adored it, and for all the reasons that you're saying. I mean, it's the brittle nature of the relationship.
So waspy.
But also they need each other.
Yeah.
Less
so Sarah maybe
maybe, but they kind of do, and it's that whole and that, it's that aspect of slavery where you've got two human beings forced into a very, very, to me, unnatural situation, and it makes it seem very unnatural. It exposes that, and the idea that a slave has to be loyal.
Yes.
You sort of, if you're not careful, you imagine that they would have sort of willingly gone along with whatever they were expected to do.
But that's what's so great, because I think Sarah
breaks that.
Yeah, and she does continuously. She's so... even she only needs to be in a room with Manon and there'll be a look.
Yeah.
Or there'll just be something being knocked over.
Like, what does power mean?
Well, also, what does property mean? That's kind of the whole theme throughout the book, is property. And also, the other thing is that I found really clever is that I empathise with both, which I found tricky, because not only is Manon obviously married to a hideous man, although she's not chosen to be in that situation, she doesn't fight against it particularly, but also she really wants her own freedom, and they both do. And that point I found really fascinating, because Manon is totally dislikable, vapid, very self-obsessed.
But she is a product of her circumstances.
She is, but also you kind of want that freedom for her.
Yes.
Just as you do Sarah,
because you hope that if she did have it, she might be different.
Yeah. Although, anyway, I won't say any more. But absolutely loved it. And again, this was one of those ones where I've read Mary O'Reilly by Valerie Martin Floyd. Have you read it?
Yes.
It's the life of the fictional housemaid in Dr. Jekyll's house, and it is amazing, absolutely amazing.
I've read a couple of her other books and loved them.
I've got Sea Love somewhere like that, which is a short story collection, which is I think some
Great
of it's
Divorce, is it called?
Yeah, that's out of print though now, sadly.
Is it? I've got it at home if you want to borrow it.
Yeah, I definitely want to read all of her books. She's one of those authors that came around and I was like, right, I have to read everything. So those are the second batch of women's winners that we've read. And I think, again, it's like we were saying in the first one, it's brought some real treats to my reading year. And also just reminded me that there are authors that I love that I need to get back to, or reminded me that there are authors who are not being sung the praises of right now, who have back catalogues.
But also the other thing is, I can see exactly why every single one of those won that prize.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Even my feelings about Bel Canto, I do think it's and I would say the same with Fugitive Pieces as well. It's extremely unusual.
Yeah.
It stands out because of the subject matter and the premise and whatever. So although for me personally it didn't work particularly well, I could see why it might for other people. So I don't feel unhappy about any of those choices. No,
I don't. I maybe do a little bit of future, but I think it's interesting because we talked about in the last video where we don't know what else was up for it. I think actually I'm glad we didn't in the reading, because that might have made me judge it.
I need to know now. I need to know. I need to know.
She'll be on Google in mere moments.
I will.
She'll be typing away, whizzing through the interweb. Anyway, that's it for this video. That's the second batch, as we said. Let us know your thoughts on them below. We haven't given any spoilers away, but happy to speak about spoilers in the comments. Although do say in the comment if there is a spoiler so that other people can miss it, if they want to. But yeah, we'll be back very soon talking about our... No, not our final four. We're at the halfway point. But yeah, you'll see that soon. And then I don't know whether we'll have done any videos on the long list or not. No, well, no. This won't be out by the time the long list is out. Blah, blah. I do this every time at the end of every video. Waffle away. All Mum wants is a cup of tea and then...
Not off in a minute.
Probably. Anyway, but I'll speak to you very, very soon. And me and my mum will be back very, very soon. But until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Bye.
Bye.